Welcome everybody to the Relentless Growth podcast. Thanks for joining us again today. And if you're liking the podcast, if you could please remember to like, follow, and share them. Or if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. It helps other people see these. And again, if you know somebody that may get some knowledge or enjoy them, please share them to them specifically. Jack, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Had a fun week full of solving problems, but a fun week nonetheless. So we'll take it. This industry is always interesting.
There you go. There you go. Good to see you. Hey, we totally forgot to do this last week, but we decided we are going to do it. So we're going to let's share a win. What's something good from this week that you had?
Yeah. So a big win for us. Kind of to relate back to last week with tariffs and everything. We've had some shipping delays with containers from overseas, and so we were about 24 hours away from a standstill and putting flooring down in one of our new multifamily projects. And we had our two containers show up that should have been here a couple of weeks ago. So that was a huge win. They always show up with zero warning, but we'll take it this time. So that was a huge
Awesome.
win this week. Kept us moving.
That's awesome. Better get some ordered sooner rather than later, probably on the next go
Absolutely,
around.
absolutely.
That's cool. That's cool.
What about
Man,
you?
I think for me, we've been busy and everything's been good. It looks like we're going to do a bunch of little pre-sold build to rents, like direct to a customer for one specific customer. Um, and so we're kind of spend some time trying to figure out how we're going to make that work. And at the end of the day, decide just to basically set them up as pre-sold. And so we got a guy who he wants like 10 to 20 of them this year. So again, they're nothing wild, but just steady flow of projects to keep everything rolling well. In the meantime, so that was kind of an exciting thing for this week. And try to get him going on the first 10 or so.
Hey, that's awesome. That's a big win. Steady work's always a big win.
Yeah, yeah. Take everything we can get right now. That's for sure. Cool, man. So I think what we decided to do today is we're going to talk about our first real estate investment deal slash projects. And so we'll kind of just go back and forth and get started with that, dive into those deep, and then maybe spend some time talking about them.
No, that sounds great. Let's jump into yours first. Kind of what was that very first deal for you? What was the project?
Yeah, so mine was it's kind of a little bit of an interesting backstory, I guess, that's worth mentioning. So I wanted to get into real estate investing for years. And I kind of wanted to do it in '08, '09, and unfortunately let other people talk me out of it. And I was living in California at the time, and it didn't. Um, I should have been buying everything I could get my hands on because you could buy real estate cheap back then, and they could have rented out for reasonable money. And then now, hindsight being 2020, they're worth probably a ridiculous amount of money, but I didn't. And then fast forward a couple of years, had made a decision I wanted to start investing, but I couldn't find anything in California that made sense to me. And out of state real estate investing has always been around, but it wasn't mainstream back then. It's like a super popular, there's books out about it, and kind of a lot of people have been doing that the last few years, but it wasn't, I'd never heard of it back then. And so I'd made the decision that I was ready to start investing, but it wasn't going to work in California. And so I decided I was just going to pick somewhere else and move and do it where it made sense. And so I told Brenda at the time we were dating back then and not married, but I was like, hey, I want to start investing in real estate and I want to do it somewhere else. Like, you want to move with me? And so she said, yeah, let's do it. And I literally called a company that I used to work for on a contract basis, and I just said, hey, where can you send me where you'll pay me the same amount of money, but it's cheaper to live? And it was like, don't you want to stay where you're at? Or how about, Dallas or Houston or all these places? I'm like, no, I don't think that'll work. And they just said, how about Little Rock, Arkansas? And I said, well, I don't know. Let me check. And so I got on Zillow, dude, and I was just like, holy crap, you can buy $30,000 houses and they rent for like $800-900 a month. Like, done, I'll take it. And it was like, dude, looking back, it was the dumbest, like craziest thing. But I literally found a foreclosure on Zillow, and called this poor real estate agent from California. It was like, hey, can you go out there and FaceTime me? And it was like, now I didn't know any better then, but it was like in the ghetto. She was probably scared to go even check it out. You sure you want to buy this? And it was just funny because I had it inspected, and the inspector who I still used or had used up until recently when he stopped doing it, he's like, dude, you don't want to buy this house. Like, trust me. He's like, just find something else. I'm like, no, no, man, it's cheap. I think it makes sense. And so, it was a $28,000 foreclosure, in Little Rock, Arkansas. And, I literally had some money saved up. And so, I paid cash, like in full, sight unseen from California. And then we moved. And it was like literally got there and it was in way worse condition than I expected. Like I had no idea how to budget or like, no real plans other than I'm just gonna get there and start working on it and we'll find help as we need it type thing. And so, that was the first one. It was a $28,000 3 bedroom, 1.5 bath foreclosure in South Little Rock. It was in way worse condition than it looked in the pictures.
And so,
And
what
then
kind of work did that project require?
it was a full like gut renovation, not all the way down to the studs, although it probably should have been, but it was disgusting. And so all the way down to bare sheetrock, so new kitchen, new bathrooms. Um, it was a little bit overcomplicated in the fact that we were like camping out in it while we were fixing it up. So we were basically camped out in one of the rooms while we were fixing up the rest of the house. And then we like finished half the house first and moved into the bedrooms and then kind of finished the rest of it. And so again, I didn't have any real budget going into it, which was not the smartest thing, but I had some money saved and literally just got to work. And so gutted the whole thing out and fixed it up and redid it a little bit over time. And then, it didn't take us too long to realize that wasn't like an area that we wanted to live long term. And so about 3 or 4 months after finishing it, we found another kind of fixer upper house in a different part of town. And we bought that fixer upper house and kind of same thing, moved into that one. We were fixing it up and then rented that first one out. So, it's a rental that I still own today. It's like at the time, I think we rented it out for $800 a month. So it was like, bought it for 28. I probably put about 50 into it. So it's about $80,000 into it all in, and then rented it out for 800 or 850, I think. And then over time, like now it's rented out for $1,200 a month, and it's still we've only had, and this is crazy because they haven't all been like this, but we've only had two tenants, and that we had one tenant that stayed
Wow.
there for like 6 or 7 years. It's always joke around like we have problem tenants all the time now, where it's like had that first one had like, one of those problem tenants, we probably would have quit because it wouldn't, some of these tenants, you have these nightmare situations. But we had a great tenant in there, and he lived there for 6 or 7 years, and then he left, and now we have a new tenant in there, and it's been great.
And
So
so, on the financial side, obviously you bought it with cash. Did you fix it up with cash? And then did you ever go and get a refinance on that or put debt on it? How did that side of it work?
yeah, so it's interesting. I bought it with cash, and then I still had a little bit of cash saved up, and we sold a bunch of stuff, and we moved, and so I fixed it up mostly with cash, and then I think what I did is I think I got a couple, zero interest credit cards, and like so some of the materials I put on credit cards that were like zero interest payments for say like a year and a half or something like that, and so, it was a combination of all cash and or those zero interest credit cards. And it was wild because I had bought that next house to move into. I think I bought another like very cheap property that I was going to do the same thing, but I still own that first rental property free and clear. And I know at the time, like I'm still a little bit debt. Well, I say that I've got a ton of debt now, but at the time I was very debt averse. Like I didn't like debt, right? But I came to this really weird fork in the road where it was like, do I keep it paid off cash and do the next one cash? And like maybe if I'm lucky, I can do one of these a year or every other year and just leave them paid off free and clear. And I've got that whole like $800 a month in cash flow just hitting my account. Or do I do, and now again, this wasn't super widespread then as it is now, but do I do the whole Burr thing and do I do a cash out refinance, put that debt on there, but like that'll allow me to, grow more aggressively. And I remember it was probably like a couple weeks I went back and forth and I quoted a loan and I really struggled with that decision. But ultimately I decided to do a cash out refinance. And it's still like I could have pulled out way more, but I pulled out like half of the appraised value and I took that cash to go do the next one. And then like looking back though, it was a huge decision. Had I not done that, like I'm sure I would still have rental properties. They'd probably all be paid off, and so it'd probably be going really well for me. But there's no way that we would be able to grow and scale the rate that we have if we hadn't put that like debt on that first one after we finished it.
And then, what do you think? What do you think that property's worth today?
It's probably so. It was I had 80,000 to it. It's probably worth like 130 to $150,000. It's not that it hasn't seen any kind of like crazy. It's gone up in value for sure, but nothing crazy. Like it's not the Little Rock market's not a crazy appreciation market. It's definitely appreciated a little bit, but the value of it has gone. The rents have definitely gone up, and so the value of it sticks pretty closely with the rental amount. So it's like whatever. It's kind of like that 1% rule thing. It's rented for. Um, 1,200 a month right now. I could sell it today for 120, but realistically, if we were going owner occupant or something like that, if it was vacant, probably 130, maybe 140. So it's worth more, but nothing crazy.
Still, but that's strong appreciation over time. What was things that went wrong, things that went right, kind of biggest lesson you learned? What were some goods and bads that you learned in that first deal?
Yeah, yeah. I would say one of the hardest lessons that I learned is don't do live-in flips, especially with a wife or a girlfriend and a kid. And it's just like that was not the best idea. Like we should have had a better, well thought out plan than that. 'Cause trying to rehab a nasty house like that while camping out in it was not a good idea. It was in way worse shape than I anticipated. So it was a lot of just like trying to figure it out as I go. Like it was like there's this unexpected problem or this thing that needs to be fixed. Like just figuring out the best way to do it. One of the things that was like I would say like helped a lot and was just something that I think about today. It still continues to be something that we spend a lot of time on is like, and I think I've told this story before, but like the first subcontractor that I had lined up and to like meet us there the day it was like we were driving into town and he was going to meet us there that day was our like our tree guy that I found on I don't even know if it was Facebook Marketplace back then. It was like Craigslist or something probably. There's this Hispanic tree guy. His name's Antonio, and he was going to meet me there. He quoted it already because the whole backyard just looked like a jungle. So they were there working when we got there. And I remember it was kind of like a rainy day. Brenda was upset. Like I think she cried when we pulled up because it was just like such a crappy house. And like, we just spent all this move, drove all the way across the country. And here we are going to like be living in this crappy house and kind of a rough part of town. But I remember sitting outside with that tree guy. They were all done with the work, and I was just kind of just talking to him a little bit and asking about the area and how long he'd been here and stuff like that. And I remember she's like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you out there bugging them? Just come inside or whatever, and let's figure out what we're gonna do." But it's just like, hey, you never know how spend a little bit of time and just chit chatting with them where that could lead. And it's funny because that one guy. Even today sometimes but especially back then when I first got started, like he probably just felt bad for us or whatever, but he's like, hey, if you need any subcontractors or if you need help with anything, like let me know because I've got I know a bunch of people here locally. And I took him up on that. There was like multiple times where we needed something done. It was like, hey, do you know somebody that can do X or do you know somebody that can come in and help? So just taking that time to like build that relationship with that one person helped make things a little bit easier. And then just that first one, it was like I was, doing a bunch of the work myself. And so it was just trying to bring people in that could help me with the stuff I couldn't do. And then the rest of it was just getting it done and getting it finished so we can move on to the next one.
That's awesome. Well, it really set the stage because you kind of continued on that path of buying houses that needed work and being comfortable doing that. And that's really helped you grow because you started out like that on your very first one.
Yeah, it couldn't get much worse. I think that's probably what's helped me. That's helped me a lot. And so, yeah, no, it was an interesting one. It definitely was a catalyst to do a bunch more of those like heavy rehab ones. Um, cool, man. Let's jump into yours because yours is probably
Sure.
the way that I wish I would have gotten started in the direction we're pushing now. And so, what was your first deal that you did?
So the first deal that I did was year after I graduated college, and it was a new build duplex. And so, somebody had asked the question last week or the week before, what's the best way to start out? And whether this is or not, it was my first deal, and so the way it all came about was pretty opportunistic. So I grew up. Obviously, I work with my dad in our business, and I grew up going to auctions my entire life. That was it's what we did on Saturdays. They used to happen a lot more than they do now, but land was always being auctioned off, or lots, or things like that. And so our office, there was a lot being auctioned off on a Saturday morning in, I think it was 2018. And we were going, and it was a 1970s neighborhood, and it was the last lot that was vacant. And we had done a little bit of research beforehand, and it turned out that it was a mainly single family neighborhood. There were a couple duplexes, but all the zoning allowed for duplexes. And so we knew that going in, and there ended up being a pretty decent crowd there. And so it ended up getting bid up and way higher than we ever really thought it would go. But we ended up buying that lot for $60,000. And so we rented at 30 a unit. And so that was kind of how it started. And then, yeah, that was the biggest learning experience of my life. It was ground up construction, foundation, footers, everything all the way. And I didn't know how much I didn't know. I thought I knew a lot. I didn't know anything. Nothing was familiar. It was just, and there were a lot of people holding my hand, and that was super helpful. But honestly, the best thing about that deal was just, I spent almost all day, every day there. And I'm not a handy guy. You're much handier than I am. But just being able to see everything happening in action was hugely valuable to me. And so, kind of how that, to go to skip to the end, I guess, it was a similar method of BRRRR, really, except replace the first B of buy with build, and that's kind of how that deal worked out full circle. And so we ended up being able to refinance out of it, or I ended up being able to refinance out of it and have no money in the deal at the end of the day. And so that was kind of an interesting result from that experience.
That's awesome. How did you finance it? So the purchase the lot and then the construction itself.
How I financed that deal, and I was fortunate in this situation. And so my dad and the company helped finance that deal from the lot and the construction side. And then so we were in the lot for $60,000. We were the full construction was complete for about 280 in terms of sticks and bricks. And so we were in the deal at 340. And so I think it took about 6 months before we could refinance out of it, but we ended up refinancing for 360. So I just took that 360, was able to pay off all of that, and was in that property for no cash out of pocket up front.
Man, that's awesome. Let me ask you this: when you were going into it, did you do like a detailed budget? Like, did you know how much it was going to cost going into it, or were you kind of just going for it and hoping for the best?
Yeah, so a lot of people ask that in our business, and we don't do a ton of detailed budgeting. What we always go off of is historical cost, and so we built similar things in the past, and so we didn't go line by line and update line items with how the cost had changed since we built the last one, but we had a general feel for, hey, we built a similar product here for X. Things have changed a little bit, but not hugely. And so we went into it with naive confidence that it was going to work out at the end of the day. And thankfully, like anything you did in that time frame, it was a great time to do it. Even if we had overbuilt or it would have been bad, the market would have saved us in a couple of years. And so the timing of that worked out well in our favor too. But yeah, we don't do pro formas or things like that. We go historical cost, and we figure it'll work out at the end of the day.
What? So starting with new construction, what part of the new construction process was like? Was there a part of it that was harder or overwhelming? And so I know for me specifically, like the
Yep.
first house that I built was my house, and like the whole from purchase the lot to like rough framing was the part that really freaked me out. How about you? Is there a part of it that was heavier or harder for you to grasp, or was it all kind of equally similar?
Yeah, I think for me, probably the toughest part was mechanicals. Just
Really?
making sure that all that, and in this case, in our market, any attached units have to be sprinklered, and so this one had to have fire
Uh,
sprinklers, which was we hadn't done in a long time, and so figuring all that stuff out, I think that was the most nerve wracking thing for me because it's the most difficult to fix later on in the process. And
mm,
and so making sure that stuff was right, making sure, especially with units that are attached, making sure everything was divided between the units, there wasn't any overlap, everything was in the respective units, nothing, no, for lack of a better term, no wires were crossed, all that sort of stuff. And so I think the mechanicals were the toughest part for me. And then the other part of that was you had fire separations, and so you had fire rated drywall and fire rated OSB that had to be in certain spots, and that was totally foreign to me. And so that's a nerve wracking process of having to make sure, when you're thinking it in your head, hey, if this thing catches fire, this stuff has to hold. And so making sure that that stuff was done right, that was a challenge for sure.
how about so like we're building a lot of like duplexes and smaller single family rentals right now. How about the plans? Did, how'd you come up with the concept of what you wanted to build? Was it
Yeah.
something you picked online? Did you hire an architect? Did you draw it yourself? How'd you come up with the plans?
Yeah. So again, I had a lot of advantages starting out. So our company has an in-house drafts person, and so what we did is we hadn't built townhomes or duplexes in a long time, and so we took a plan from 10 or 15 years prior to that, and we updated it. And so everything used to be cut up. We made the whole downstairs open concept. Each unit was about 1,300 square feet, and so the big advantage of that was we had the bones that we knew worked and that we built before and were familiar with. But we changed out the interior inside of it. We're able to update bathrooms, bedrooms, make everything a little bit more functional and more current. And so we had a pretty good starting place, and it was just tweaking really from that point to modernize the plan.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's cool. You started with new construction. It's probably a lot of I don't know, a fresher, more scalable way to do it. How about the manage? So when you were finished, did you keep it as a rental or did you sell it or what did you do with it after it was finished?
Yeah. So what I ended up doing, a little unique. I kept it, still own it today, but I did one side as a long-term rental, and I did one side as an Airbnb.
Oh wow.
Uh, and so I was very interested in the Airbnb model and also very skeptical because we're located in Spring Hill, Tennessee, which is about 30 minutes south of Nashville. And in all really, it's not like a touristy place. It's not some place people go. And so I was pretty worried about whether we were going to have occupancy in that side. I knew the long term rental side would work, um, but again, that was just a timing thing. We had going into COVID, we stayed leased up with 3 to 6 month rentals from people building houses in Tennessee.
Mm,
We put we put a lot of our own customers in there, which helped me, but it just the timing of that worked out perfect. And so it's interesting. I think I'm considering pivoting off the Airbnb right now, but it was a good the way the math works on this property. The long term rental side, more or less, is a break even with the mortgage, and so it allows the Airbnb side to that's the gravy and the profit on the deal. And so it worked out really well. We've had zero conflict between long term and short term tenants, and so it's been great. But I'm not sure I would do it again like that. But it's been a really great learning experience to have both sides of that going at once.
that's awesome. And did you self manage for the Airbnb in the long term or did you bring in a management company?
I did not. We had some friends locally who managed a small portfolio. It's grown a lot since they took ours on, but they were already doing it and doing it at a pretty high level. And customer service is probably not my forte. I would prefer not to answer text on a Sunday night, So they handled it and did it for a reasonable rate, and so I was happy to let them take that on. But we managed the long term the long term rental side in house, and that's relatively low touch on that end.
That's awesome. Yeah, we had a bunch of, not a bunch, we had like five or six Airbnb, like small Airbnbs, very similar people, traveling nurses, people building, people here
Mm-hmm.
for work temporarily, that kind of stuff. We, after catching up all the accounting on it last year, we're pulling them all out of service as Airbnbs and switching them back to long term rentals because they were profitable. They were more profitable than the long term, but barely. And they were a lot more when there was a problem with them. They were a lot more of a headache than the long term. So it's interesting that you were saying you may pull
Well,
it out.
and
They
you
were good
probably
when we
saw,
started.
yeah, you probably saw this too. The biggest thing, I mean, we see it across the board, but insurance on that Airbnb is really the killer for me right now. And so that's the main reason I'm considering pivoting out of it. Is just that insurance cost is so high from a property insurance standpoint. And so, yeah, I think same thing. It's definitely more profitable, but it's close. It's too close for it to probably be worth it. You know.
Yeah, that's what I found too. What about and I come from like a guess at this, but how is the value of that duplex changed since you built it, and then also the rental rates? Have you seen a big change in the rental rate since you built it, and how about the value?
Yeah, absolutely. So the value we've seen, obviously, some a pretty big swing, which is great. So we built it for 340 all in, and in general, we probably had roughly 20% margin built in there on the front end. I think we could have sold each unit for 225 to maybe a little bit more than that right on the front end. But obviously, with the market run up through COVID, I think conservatively that duplex is probably worth about 600 right now. I think 300 a unit would be an achievable price on the market. And that's zero that we did. That's just market. That just you got in before cost. Just the cost to replicate that is probably 40 to 50% higher now. I mean, so it just the timing was just right on that. And then rents, we've seen. I'm struggling to remember where we were at when we got started. Probably around 13 or 1400 on that long term side was our rent. Um, and we've seen it, if my memory serves me correctly, stretch up as high as into the 1800s, I believe, and
Oh,
then
wow.
at the height. But then the last 2 years, it's kind of dropped back down a little bit as kind of rates have been pushed back down, and so I think we're 1700 and change right now on rent in that thing, which is a very healthy rent. So there's been generally, if you plot it linearly, strong rent growth on that property.
That's awesome. Have you? So this is something I've been dealing with a little bit recently, and I just sold one of the first fourplexes that we bought and fully renovated. And it was something I bought 6 or 7 years ago, and have seen it increase quite a bit in value, and the rents drive up and everything like that. And I decided to sell it just because I had so much like tied up equity in it. And I realized that it's like it was kind of trapped equity. I can't really refinance it with the way the rates are right now and pull that out and use it for something else and still afford the payment. So I decided to sell it, and then I'm going to redeploy the cash into more ground up new construction. I'm going to take the cash from that one fourplex sale, and I'm going to go build a bunch of ground up new construction duplexes. They won't cash flow that well, but I can do more of them. But I was like going back and forth whether that I still don't know if that was the right decision to sell it. Like I did, it wasn't a 1031, so I'm going to take a tax hit, but I'm going to redeploy that and do more deals. Have you thought about selling that first duplex because it's got a lot of trapped equity in it, or are you just going to hold it forever, or what's your thoughts on that?
My general outlook is I'm going to hold everything forever, and that's never going to be 100% true. But I think the unique thing in our market versus yours, there's not a really easy way to have another deal like that. So there are
Yeah,
very few like single lots out there. There are very few places that are zoned for a duplex. And so I think kind of the uniqueness of that property is what makes me want to hang on to it the most because there There just don't single family lots on an individual or couple basis just don't really come up for sale in our market. And so just being able to have that in a good established area is kind of what I look at the most, and just the relatively inexpensive debt, compared to what we can get on things today on that property is it would take a really strong number, I think, for me to consider selling it right now.
Is that locked in like on a 30-year long-term
Yep,
loan, or is it
yep.
on shorter term debt?
That's
Oh,
on a
that's awesome.
30-year note. Yep.
What's the interest rate?
I think on that one it's 3.375.
That's crazy, huh? It's
Yeah.
crazy. The
Yeah.
the interest rate and the debt's almost worth more than
Yeah.
the
100%. And that's the problem that a lot of homeowners are in right now. They've got a rate like that. They're in a house they don't love, maybe, but who can leave that rate? And
It
so
doesn't. It
it's
doesn't make
tough.
sense to sell it. That was the
Yeah.
deciding factor for me. So that fourplex, I was really on the fence on whether or not I should sell it, but it's on floating debt that matures next year, and so I'm like, it's cash flowing really well right now. If I have to refinance it to a higher rate next year, it's still going to cash flow. It's just not going to cash flow as well. And so it's like I
Right.
might as well just sell it and take the gain now and try to do something else.
And I was having
Cool.
this
Any
conversation actually the other day, just to kind of your debate of to sell or not to sell. And it's always an interesting one because if you sell at the top of the market, obviously you get greater proceeds, more money, but then you're also trying to redeploy at the top of the market. And so selling when values aren't the highest, I think sometimes plays to your advantage because you're also able to deploy that capital when you can pick stuff up that's, and you can be aggressive in acquisition. And so I was having that debate with a bunch of guys a couple of days ago because it's a really interesting theory of, hey, do I wait? I know in 2 years, or nobody knows, but in 2 years, that fourplex is going to be worth a lot more. But what can you do with that capital now that's going to be better in the next 2 years? So I think it's a really interesting debate, especially for people who own a property or two of, hey, do I hold this forever? Do I sell and do something else? I think it's a debate that a lot of people are having right now.
I think yeah. Like I said, I struggle with it. I went back and forth. I still don't know if it was the right decision, but I guess I do have those deals teed up, and I bought some like on that same street a couple years ago or whatever, and it's like I can't get that same deal there right now. So it's like I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. Just what makes the most sense. And I have the unique situation that I already have lots lined up, ready to build on. So it's like I have a use for it
Absolutely.
today instead of like trying to. If I didn't have something else that I knew I could start immediately, I wouldn't. I don't think I would have sold it. It just wouldn't have made sense. So
No,
cool.
absolutely. That makes
Any
sense.
other major lessons learned for you on that first new construction? Like something that you would have done differently, or wish you would have known going into it?
I think the biggest thing I would say is everybody is going to teach you something. On that deal, being my first one, I learned from plumbers, I learned from HVAC guys, I learned from everybody across the board taught me something. And I think that was the most valuable thing to me was the lessons, and just being able to get knowledge from, some people might go into a deal and like you said, with relationships with subcontractors, they might view people as, hey, they're there to do a job, but those people were hugely helpful to me, asking questions, being curious, and so there are still things that I learned on that job that I use today, just by having conversations with people while being out there. And so I think that's a real interesting similarity between our two experiences of those relationships are really what drives it, and being able to learn from people. So that was probably my biggest takeaway.
Any major like unforeseen, like, and I'll give you an example. When I built my first house, we were like, it was COVID times. And so one, the budget was all, we went way over budget, but then two, it was like taking like 3 months to get stuff like windows back then. And I had half the windows got stolen out of the garage, like right after they got delivered. And like hindsight, I should have had them locked in a shipping container or something. Anything crazy like that happen on that first one?
We had a real weird thing happen on this one. Yeah, I told you we had to use a sprinkler system, and
Yeah.
so we were working on getting the sprinklers. We had to work with a new subcontractor because we weren't familiar with that, and so part of that is we had to do a pressure test at the nearest fire hydrant at the road, and there
Hmm.
wasn't enough pressure to have enough flow to do a sprinkler system. And so, we were like, all right, what are the other options out there? And so what we ended up having to do is essentially add on a little shed outside the house and set, I can't remember how many gallons it is off the top of my head, but like a 500-gallon tank
Yeah,
in that shed
package
with it.
package system. Yeah.
Yep. So that you had an increased quantity of water to assist the flow if there ever was an event. And that was something I was totally unfamiliar with when that problem first came up. I was like, oh man, this is the end. But thankfully that solution worked out. The only other tough thing, which was we had absolutely the minimum fall to the sewer tap. And so we had to set that duplex at the absolute perfect height, bring in dirt around it just to make that side of it work. But those are just things that obviously they're things we check now, but there's things that I would never ever even think about if I hadn't had those things pop up. So they were really good lessons in the scheme of things.
Man, that's awesome. That's really cool. That
What was
first
there anything?
that fourplex that I just sold, we use one of those tanked water systems. That's the only reason I know what it is. We've
Yep.
got one in there. So the city of Little Rock won't let us use them anymore, unfortunately, because they're kind of cool. But
Yeah, I like them.
yeah. What were you gonna ask?
No, I was just going to say, you're just to wrap it up for everybody. What was kind of your biggest takeaway from your deal that just to bring it all to a head?
Yeah, I think for me, and I think I talked about this on one of the other ones, is just getting started. Dude, that first one that I did was like, I probably shouldn't have bought the house, and it probably wasn't that, the best deal in the world, but just doing that first one and like getting through it, and now like time with real estate, I feel like heals a lot of those poor, even if it was a bad choice. Not saying it was a bad choice, and a lot of it may have just been luck, but just getting that first one done was like the biggest takeaway for me because and like you said, we ended up doing that was a heavy rehab and it was really stressful, but then it allowed me to take on the next one, which was even worse, and the one after that, which was probably even worse. And so I think just making the decision to do that first one and then figuring it out, because it wasn't simple and there was a bunch of stuff that came up and had to be figured out. And I look back at, like, I see the pictures of it now in the kitchen, or it was not like something that I'm super proud of now, because it was very like it was very new and early on, but it just got it going, and then that has continued to evolve over time. So I think for me, that biggest takeaway was just making the decision to do the first one and then get through it.
No, that's absolutely the most important thing is getting started.
Cool. I think that was it. I think that's a good one. One thing I would say, if anybody here is listening and they're active investors, or even if they've only done one or two deals, like I'd be kind of interested to hear what your first deal was like. And so maybe throw it in the comments, or shoot us a message or whatever. But I'd be curious to see what other people's first ones were, and then what their biggest lesson learned off their first deal was.
100%. Yeah, we'd love to hear from everybody on this stuff. I think the first deals are always the most fun because usually there's something wacky that you probably would never do if you knew what you knew now. But that's the fun of it.
Uh, Cool, man. Well, it was good seeing you again. Everybody else, if you get something out of this, please don't forget to like and share it, and we'll see you next week.
See y'all next week.